Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. We will just give everyone else a couple more seconds to enter the room and then we'll get started. Hold on tight. Okay, let's get going. Thank you all for joining this Reuters Events webinar on digital health, navigating market access and securing approval. If you saw any of the promotional materials for this webinar, you will recognise that I am not my colleague Patricia Sybinska. My name is Carla Sharp. I'm Director of Research and Development Projects at Reuters Events, and I'm standing in for Patricia, who's unfortunately unwell today. As I mentioned, the topic for discussion on today's webinar is navigating market access, acceptance and approval for digital health products. We'll be zooming in on the UK framework in today's examples and dividing our conversation into three segments: current guidance and shortfalls, room for progress, and indeed the need for progress, and looking towards future guidance. With today's discussion, we are planning to create more of a conversation among the panelists, but do interject with your questions throughout using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many of those questions as possible. To get used to using that Q&A box now, feel free to say hello in there and tell us where you're listening from. So without further ado, I'm honoured to be joined by three experts in the field today. So we'll kick off the conversation with some introductions from them. Jesper, would you like to start?
Of course, thanks, and looking forward for today. My name is Jesper Bjørgren, and I am the EU Market Access Lead for Digital Health, amongst others, with Teva Pharmaceuticals. Teva is mainly known as a generic company, I would say, but we do have a strong foothold in innovative medicines, and for the past some 5-6 years also within digital health. So pleased to join.
Thank you, Jesper. Conrad?
Hi, everybody. My name is Konrad Dobschütz. Don't try the surname. I'm National Director for the NHS Innovation Accelerator, which is a NHS England funded program, as well as Chief Enterprise Officer, UCL Partners. Just really quickly background-wise, I worked 6 years in pharma. I worked for MasterCard, as well as in e-commerce for a while, and fashion retail, as you can tell by the look of my shirt. Not.
Thanks, Conrad. Farhan?
Thanks, Carla. So I'm Farhan Ismail. I'm the Associate Director of the Office for Digital Health and Topic Intelligence at NICE, and been at NICE for 2 years now, bringing my passion for innovation, knowledge and networks from the health and care system, and experience of developing healthcare IT as a clinical safety officer in the NHS to NICE. And I've joined NICE with the aim of developing a portfolio of evaluations for digital health tech through its medtech evaluation programs and supporting some of its policy work. And you may be familiar with some of the outputs from NICE, the evidence standards framework, real world evidence frameworks, which have come out over the last couple of years. My background is I am very familiar with the position of pharma in healthcare, being a clinical pharmacist, and I've worked on the front line in lots of different hospitals. And I've also worked across contracting, commissioning in various large acute services in a commissioning support unit.
Great, thank you. So as you can tell, we have this huge wealth of experience on today's panel. So let's kick off then with the first kind of thematic area for the conversation today, which is on the current guidance and shortfalls. What key components make up current UK guidance for preparing digital health products for access, acceptance and approval? And what do each of our panelists feel is the greatest shortfall in the current guidance? And is anything being done to overcome this? Again, Jesper, I'll go to you first on this one, please.
And difficulties in unmuting, sorry. I think what we do see is, of course, looking across at taking European perspective here, we we do see, surprisingly, actually, Germany being the front seat, as the majority of us know, with Belgium, France kicking up. But I actually think that the UK is moving quite well ahead in the guidance, because what we really need in order to make these kind of innovation work is some kind of guidance to how do we prove that it works, because of course all the basics needs to be right, and I think there you have in the UK you have a pretty good and I look at especially at Farhan looking at the approval process and the quality process, that of course if you do something it should work, but for me it's very much about value. How do we prove that it actually brings value in a way that it requires that it comes out to patients and make an impact in real life, and that's where I struggle a little bit in the UK, is that we have some good framework, but the reimbursement, the pricing, the implementation part is still, I would say, under development in that sense, and especially and I think that's something that I'll come back to repeatedly again from a pharmaceutical company. I'm not from a digital health per se, but something where digital health is a component on the medication. So when you start to integrate, then it gets really tricky, and that's where I guess no one has cracked the nut yet. So a good pace, I would say, but still a lot to learn and a lot to do in terms of proving how do we show value.
Okay, thank you very much. Opening the floor to Conrad and Farhan, what would you like to add?
If you want to jump in terms of the guidance and prep, I think that's where NICE is really leading the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Jesper wholeheartedly. One of the biggest challenges we have in the NHS is the reimbursement mechanism for digital. It is a work in progress. We work closely with DHSC, MHRA, NHS England. We're seeing a lot of activity in that space. It's taking time to get there. And you mentioned like DIGA in Germany being a good example of what is possible. It'll be interesting to know what their outcomes have been from this. Ultimately, I think pharma sits in a slightly different position where it's familiar with healthcare because of its pharmaceutical, pharmaceutical approach or element to its business, but at the same time, digital requires a slightly different mindset, and simply because of how agile the industry is, it moves a lot quicker. The principles of safety, quality, efficacy, effectiveness, they're all important for digital. You see these in pharma as well, but what elements are critical to the system? There is a significant effort required to build trust in digital. And how do you do that? You need to look out to the guidance that's already published. I mentioned the evidence standards framework as at the beginning in my introduction, and that's really a place to start to give developers an indication of how they need to frame development of their technologies based on what we know end users, clinicians, patients are interested in.
Thanks, Farhan. Conrad?
So I think it's really to build on that. It's some of the work that through the Health Innovation Networks, as well as the NHS Innovation Accelerator that we're involved in, and kind of steering from the ground up in the voice of the innovators, is that evidence development along the pathway. So if you look at how pharma develops in R&D space and then clinical trials and then gets market approval for medicine, a kind of similar approach we should adopt for digital. So I'm particularly talking about health tech. I'm less so medtech side. Medtech for me is for us is a different kettle of fish. Is where you enter, you put a stent into somebody's artery. That's with innovative technology. That's like a medtech piece, right? Health tech is your patient support programs, patient-facing engagement platforms. It's anything digital therapeutic wise. So what we need to do, and I know Farah and NICE is working on that, and I also know that NHS England is working on that with the Chief Commercial Office as well, is to design that pathway of procurement. What kind of evidence do I need at any stage to be permitted or be procurable and ultimately become procurable as a national, from a national standpoint. So that is, I think that's where, when we look at pharma, the pharma world and of regulatory, and look at the digital health world, the disparity is because there's no clarity around evidence. What is good efficacy for a digital therapeutic in vision? Well, what is it? Well, mental health is kind of, we're getting there. You know, you can talk about reduction of anxiety and all that stuff. We're getting there. But with a lot of the other stuff, we're just, there's no clarity. What's the evidence? I'm looking towards NICE, right, to help with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are building experience in this. I think the reality is we talk to other agencies globally and everyone is trying to figure this out. There's a lot of uncertainty, which we've all got to work through collectively, but the principles of building a good evidence base still apply to digital. And the way that you'd use it for pharmaceuticals, you need to think along the same lines for digital.
Yeah. And let's not forget about DiGA in Germany, which gets hailed as the groundbreaking initiative. But I want to see the evidence, because you get 2 years of an easy pass, and after 2 years you need to prove your worth, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's to be seen. The numbers are shooting up. I know, my home country, right? But ultimately, let's have a look in 1 or 2 years. I don't mean to poo-poo on DiGA now. But it's one example of a centralized system of letting medtech and health tech innovation into the healthcare system. Also, let's not compare apples with pears, because Germany has a completely different healthcare system than we have. So we're just going to have to be a bit careful here. The holy DiGA grail versus reality.
And I think that's actually, I think it's great that you say it, because when I speak to people across Europe, the first question we usually get back when after discussing this is, first of all, saying digital is the future. That's the path we want to go. And then the next question is, what do they do in country X, which is usually the neighboring country, because they all want to know what are the rest of the bunch doing, because nobody, and I think you're speaking that correctly, that nobody knows how to grasp this one, because how do you prove effectiveness for something where you don't know what good looks like, because we've never tried this before, and now we're actually even only talking about, we say, standalone digital health interventions, not something more sophisticated where we try to integrate, let's say, pharmaceutical, medical devices, management systems, and all those kind of stuff. But more, you get an app on your phone that can help you do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So the clarity, also from a company side, is very, very, very important, because of course when you need to talk to senior management or investors or somebody like that, where I say we have £1, should we put it in box 1 or should we box 2 or box 3? Then the chance of getting through to actually reimbursement, to volume, to approval and usage is very difficult to justify that you should invest here, because that will lead to X, Y, Z. So the clarity from the likes of NICE is really, really sought after.
I agree.
Okay, amazing. Great conversation so far. And I wanted to interject, because we did talk briefly about evidence generation. There is an audience question talking about, to justify investment in evidence generation, a business case must be made. Therefore, how do we justify investment in evidence generation if we do not yet understand the revenue potential of an asset? I wondered if anyone would like to comment on that question.
That is a really
it.
Boom.
Everyone.
I'm happy to step back.
Jesper, you want to go first?
I can do first. Not stepping on each other's toes. That is really the core issue. I think is that when we're used to in a world where we know the categories, where we have some kind of certainty that if we do a study that's like XYZ, we do for a pharmaceutical, we do a consultation with NICE, with GBA, with HAAS, somebody like that say, how should you do your study? What should your comparators be? What should your outcome be? The duration of the study, all those kind of stuff. And then we try to build a study that matches those criteria. So the lack of that clarity is really where we have the issues, and that is, honestly speaking, that is an issue for me, that I cannot sit with a good feeling and say, if we do like this will happen. I can say, I think this will happen, or based on something I've heard and seen, this might happen, but I essentially I don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree with that assessment. I mean, as I mentioned, the reimbursement efforts are underway nationally, so there is a lot of attention being put on digital solutions and what value propositions, how the value propositions can be realized for the population. I think the reality is you've got to look at your proof of concept and have a lot of confidence in your product that it can deliver a meaningful impact for patients at the end of that pathway, and that may justify the investment and the time that's required to build the studies around the products. When we have committee, we have discussions around the true benefits of digital. There's still so much uncertainty in this space, which then translates into a lack of trust and lack of adoption and lack of market access and everything else. So you can see it all starts off with making a clear position, or creating a clear position for your products with its value claims. It's not an easy one to sort. You know, the NHS has got things like the medtech funding mandate. I think the bar for that is quite high. And there are obviously pros and cons to that process for medtech. We've yet to see anything digital come through that. And is that a reflection of the low evidence levels that we're seeing in digital at the moment? But I think we've got a bit of time to go to make sure we're encouraging developers to think of digital in the right way, to generate the right sort of data, and that puts us in a stronger position to build the confidence and trust in the products.
Yeah, no, I've got nothing to add. I think that hits the nail on the head.
Okay, thank you for that question in the audience. So to move on then to kind of room for progress, need for progress as our kind of second thematic area of conversation. Digital health currently requires partnerships across multiple stakeholders, and often these partners are not familiar with regulatory or value demonstration requirements. So what advice could you give for bringing external partners up to speed? Conrad, I'd love to kick off with you on that one, please.
It's thank you. It's a great question. It's not as we've heard that question before. So essentially, it's around creating a true partnership model. So very often, you like what, for example, we've done and I've done in my time in Novartis, and still now with the Health Innovation Network with UCL partners as well as in the NIA. What we're looking to is creating triple wins. Essentially, you would have a startup, you would have maybe a life sciences company, and you would have an NHS entity that could be a trust or an ICS, and you have a conversation around how you can actually meet the big needs of the NHS with the big tech and the big might of a pharma company. So the creation of a partnership, which I also led in Novartis in the Biome, which I was leading there, the innovation lab, before I joined my current gig. It is essentially around creating a joint value offer. So you have a life sciences company that comes through the door with a patient-reported outcome management tool, and pitching in through collaborative workings to the NHS. And the hints are health innovation networks, called HSNs before, are actually a good place to get this stuff going, because they're sort of a bit of the glue of everything. Startups require a revenue stream to survive. So really, what you're looking at is so that's why a lot of pharma companies are either scaling down their sort of innovation labs, because ultimately the startups that work with them, they don't have long enough legs to wait the 12, 18 months until things get going. And sometimes pharma companies are slower than the NHS, surprise. Or they build up, like AstraZeneca now, their own very own digital health entity with their own products. Bayer has the same thing going. Janssen has the same thing going. So there is with J Labs. So there is a single entity that actually pushes digital health, but as an in-house kind of thing. So the question really that startups are asking us all the time, so how do I access the NHS that is made out of 2,000 entities, and they're unified by one thing, and that's the logo. So that is really the question. As a startup, you need to assess what's my risk appetite and my opportunity cost working with a life sciences company that can help me going into the NHS. You need to at least plan 12 to 18 months until something goes. You need to have the run rate to support that. And that's one of the key considerations in this sort of partnership world.
Thanks, Conrad. Farhan, when we had our kind of preparation call last week for this, you made a really interesting point about the innovation top-down versus bottom-up. I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit from the NICE perspective.
I mean, this pretty much refers to principles of user-centric design. So where you've got innovation, you can't really drive innovation from the top down, where you've got the NHS is a highly variable system. I think Conrad said it perfectly. It's thousands of organizations with a single logo. So to get your product right for the system, you need to make sure it's been designed with users in mind. And this partnership working is, I mean, it's critical in healthcare, full stop. If you look at medicines as the baseline, it's not a single group of people that drive the use of medicines across the system. It requires lots of integration of different professionals, different organizations, from commissioners through to service providers, and ultimately patients at the end as the users, to really extract the benefit of a medicine. And I think digital needs to be thought of in a very similar way. It's slightly different with digital, because what we find is there are highly technical innovators with really good ideas trying to make them fit the health system. And perhaps a better way of thinking of this is to focus digital solutions around users and their needs. And there's a body of literature around innovation and how you can support an improved adoption process by including clinicians and patients in the co-development process of any given technology. And the main thing is, I mean, this is still a fairly new area. Do not be afraid to seek out early advice from lots of the innovation partners that are out there. There's lots of people trying to drive innovation. You mentioned the Health Innovation Networks. Conrad leads an organization that's also involved in this. NICE has got an advisory service which supports this. There are lots of people trying to make this very complicated pathway easier for innovators. But at the end of the day, the technology needs to deliver a meaningful impact for patients. And I think that's where user-centric design is important. And that essentially happens from the ground up.
Thank you, Farhan.
I think that's actually, if I may jump in on that one, because it's maybe the most, I know I've said this a couple of times already, the most important theme is that where to start. Do we start with an issue from real life, with an actual issue with patients and HCPs, or do we start with this is technically possible? So because my fear could be that some start with, if you start with what's technically possible, this is a cool feature, then you face issues relatively soon. But if you start with the ground up work, saying that we do see an issue with, let's say, access to mental health care. Say how do we solve that issue that you don't have access to, that one? That could be via video, that could be via an app or something like that. Then you can start to build from that one. But the starting point is, and I think that's where we really need to start is with patients and HCPs. But again, it's an immature field. This one, so there's still we still need to do a lot of errors. Everybody needs to do a lot of errors, because we can't be right from the onset.
I think one piece that is important is identification of the common problem to solve, and because ultimately, if there's no rallying around in these partnership models, and I've used life science, startup, NHS or healthcare system, if we can't agree on a common theme we want to solve, for example, early cancer diagnosis in upper GI, and we want to solve that together in a certain patch for a certain patient cohort, and disparity of access of treatment is an issue, i.e. health inequalities, that is basically the beginning of a really good problem statement. So that's what we need to do. Otherwise, and I could say this here, today I'm in BMA house, we have the same conversations. Why are we doing what we're doing? And that's the whole point. You can create hundreds of partnerships, and they have been created. They fall by the wayside. Examples are a lot, and I'm not going to mention names, but large healthcare insurers with large tech. Often it just doesn't fly because they are not solving a problem. They're just getting together because it's the thing of the time to get together. Get your problem right, and your partnership will be successful.
And just to come back on that, if I may, innovation hype cycles are really well documented. You might be familiar with them. That's a trap that a lot of people fall into. If you look at, so I mentioned earlier, I lead on topic intelligence for the health tech work at NICE. That's essentially we've been doing it for 2 years. We're looking at problems and then the technologies that can address those problems. We're quite fortunate in the NHS in that we have lots of regular policy publications coming out. We've got the long-term plan, appreciate it's from 2019, but those problems haven't gone away. In fact, in many ways, they've been exacerbated through COVID. So those problems have been worsened. We've got things like the major condition strategy. There are lots of places to start looking for problems. And essentially NICE is a part of the system that's looking to help the NHS address those problems. So the entire early value assessment program that NICE has pivots around looking for system need, looking for those problem statements, looking for the technologies that can address those needs. Now, innovation for the sake of innovation is sometimes not helpful, and it's often riddled with lots of uncertainty because it's new. So the things that are well established may deliver something known and familiar to the system in a slightly different way. They may have a better prospect than something that's brand spanking new and no one really knows what the true impact of it might be.
Okay, thank you. There's a question that's come in from the audience around when is a good time to seek advice. Would you gain advice, scientific advice, with the MHRA or with Access? Anyone want to tackle that one?
So from NICE's perspective, as an evaluator for the NHS, ideally we'd like to see products beyond well, it depends on the program, I think is a short answer. You might be familiar with the Innovative Devices Access Programme. That's a partnership between NICE, MHRA, Health Technology Wales and Scotland's equivalent. That is really looking for this pre-regulatory technology that has a very strong value proposition, could be game-changing, addresses a critical unmet need, and is designed to chaperone these companies through the regulatory process, the evidence generation process, with a view to get them to the market as quickly as possible. So the parallel to that would be the innovative licensing access pathway, which is the pharmaceutical equivalent. So that's currently in a pilot stage. Beyond that, if you want to get NICE's attention, you need to at least have a proof of concept study completed. We get really early ideas, which are just ideas on paper. We can't really do anything with those. They're very well thought out. They might be exciting. But if you're at the point of designing a study for a proof of concept, that would be a reasonable place to reach out for scientific advice to make sure that the study does address the value proposition claim that the technology is making.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Conrad, there's a question for you. I don't know if you wanted to comment on Farhan's answer, but there is
No, that's okay.
Perfect. So Conrad, have we placed the cart before the horse? Is the biggest benefit to the NHS from a digital perspective not the aggregation of disparate EHRs? Can we deliver on all the promises of digital while the foundation is so fragmented?
So, and I actually thank you for asking that question. I actually picked to answer that. So there's, I think 2 weeks ago, the Federated Data Platform was announced. That's a starting point, and it got a lot of press. But I've picked to answer the question because I agree. There's a fragmentation. But however, I also want to highlight that we're gonna have to. We can't always say we can't really launch large-scale population health solutions in England or in the UK, because the AHRs, Cerner, Epic, and then in primary care, EMIS and System 1 are disintegrated or not integrated enough. There is still, if you look at them, EMIS represents about 70% in NHS England land of GP footprint. That is a huge data set. So you can operate with that. You can do it. And it is not sort of fragmented to a way that it is highly localized. But the biggest problem is that and people from the NHS England team around frontline digitization, they're looking after the EPR, EHR rollout. What they're actually struggling with or tackling rather is how does this get optimized? So you've got your EPR in place now as an ICS or a large provider trust. What you do with all that data? Because if you look at the Royal Free, for example, here in my neck of the woods, they're representing hundreds of thousands of patients and their data, or UCLH. We can do so much with that already. And we can optimize the data usage of these platforms to a degree that we can launch improvements in a cumulative fashion for millions of patients. So to give you a rough timeline, I'm fairly certain in the next 2 to 5 years, roughly, right? We'll see a more data integrated effort. We will see a unified data platform emerging. So, but the encouragement is to work with what we have right now to give patients access to that risk stratification, to ensure that they get access at the right care at the right time.
Thanks.
And I think that if I may jump in on that one as well, because it's really about not to see the issues before you see the opportunities. Because even if the world is not perfect, as you say, Conrad, then we still have a vast amount of data. We still do have many patients on the same system. We may not have all patients all integrated into the same system, but please tell me one country where that's the case, which is bigger than a very small one at least. But even if I'm based in Denmark, and even in the Nordic countries with fairly small, fairly homogeneous, we do have multiple EMRs within each country. So for my part, it's just about getting started and seeing that we may not only get to 50% of the country, but at least we get access to the 50% of the country with this solution. So just get started. That would be my call.
Great, thank you. This ties in very nicely to one of the questions that we had developed beforehand, talking about fragmented healthcare system infrastructure. So I wanted to ask this and see if there was anything else you'd like to add. How can stakeholders better target digital innovation to the true timely technological needs of those systems? And what do you see that could potentially be standardized and what cannot? Opening the floor again to whoever would like to add on that one.
You're free.
So if I can say a little bit about that one, because when looking across Europe, actually UK and especially England with the NHS is in a very good shape, I would say, because you have more or less a single payer system. Even if we're talking about the 2,000 entities only unified by the NHS logo, as you say, we still don't have a fragmented system. Like if we take Germany with insurance funds, and then you have private hospitals and you have private doctors, and if you go into let's take Germany as an example, where you come in with a brilliant innovation that for chronic patients that reduce the pool on GP resources. That's from a system perspective, overall system perspective, fantastic. But the financing system is that the GP gets paid one amount, no matter how many consultations he has. So he has a clear incentive to implement this one. But should he pay for it then, or should it be the insurance fund? Because they don't have an incentive to pay for additional for this one, because they pay the GP the same amount, no matter if he has one consultation or he has 200 consultations. So in that sense, I think actually UK is in a very good shape. So yeah, we can call it fragmented, but not as fragmented as take you across the pond, then you can talk about fragmented.
Great point. Oh, Conrad, you're muted.
Yay, I did it. It's a problem with 2 mute buttons, one on the laptop and one in Zoom. So look, I mean, it all comes down to the evidence that is being generated, and I think that's really important. And quality of evidence is one of the key pieces that we need to focus on. It comes back to that procurement pathway, the journey into the health system, and Jesper, the NHS is unfortunately not a single payer system. We've got 42 ICSs and we've got provider trusts at the moment, and the ICSs are not at the moment. We have provider trusts, and the ICSs or integrated care boards as well. They are around for 2 years. There's still a lot of toing and froing going on with who actually owns responsibility, accountability, who owns the money, essentially. And a lot of the budgeting, a lot of the local money still sits with large provider trusts, and not with the ICB. And that is already an issue for people when they want to enter. Who do they talk to? So entities like the NIA, as well as the health innovation networks, help to navigate that to a certain degree.
Agree. I may be exaggerating a little bit, call this single payer, because I know all too well that there are all those issues. But the main point for me is really that we don't have in the UK. It's less, or more rather say less fragmented, as we do see in many other places. So, but good point taken, Conrad.
I think just to Carla, just to cut across some of the fragmentation challenges, what we do have in the NHS are standards. So DTAC is a good example. More people paid attention to things like the digital technology assessment criteria, which factors in lots of concepts: cybersecurity, privacy, data protection, information governance, clinical safety, lots of different things. If everyone was aware of that, that would probably be a large chunk of work completed. Needs to be done to a good standard. A lot of the technologies that NICE has seen and been requested to evaluate, they don't have DTAC compliance. And that's before we get to the clinical evidence and the benefits of outcomes, which you've not even explored yet. So from a standardization perspective, getting the basics right, so that's your regulatory status, which is slightly more complicated for software as a medical device compared to pharmaceuticals. And then on top of that, being aware of things like DTAC, which are very useful tools for making sure any given technology is adoptable for the system. So NICE pays attention to these things. It's a good place to start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. A question did come in from the audience that I'll throw out to you all now. For those in a policy-making position, with which stakeholders do you anticipate working with to define clinical trial standards for regulatory approval of digital health technologies?
I mean, ultimately, the regulators are MHRA. We've worked with them around the evidence standards framework, which published last year. They're linked to the IMDRF global standards for digital health. So the language should be uniform as much as possible. We're not sure what the next 5 years or so will bring us, but we do work very closely with the MHRA on the regulatory side of things. From the evaluation perspective, there is a lot of activity going on across Europe to develop digital health technology frameworks. So this is, how do you do HTA for digital? Lots of questions about that. We don't have the answers. Some of the projects we're seeing are going to take 3 to 4 years to conclude. We're at the beginning of that journey. Other partners, I mean, everyone is interested in digital in the system. From where we're sitting, we're working with everyone: DHSC, NHS England, MHRA, CQC, absolutely everyone who has a stake in healthcare is interested in developing the ecosystem for digital.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Farah. I mean, I've sort of kept slightly quiet on this one. So all we're doing is just helping people understanding the voice from the ground of the innovators that we're representing, of their issues. Nowhere near like lobbying or anything. It's just as it is. These are the barriers. These are the issues. How can we solve them together? Because ultimately we want the UK to be like a living thing for life sciences, for digital health tech, medtech, to create employment here and to keep people here. That's really what we're here for, and that's what we want to do.
Okay, great. Just
at the same time, we need to be a little patient, I think, because right now we're talking about something in the medicine space that has taken years to develop, and this is still a very immature field where even the terminology is not set yet. Say, when we talk about digital health, what do we actually talk about? Do we talk about standalone apps on patients' phones? Do we talk about AI supportive mechanisms for scannings or something like that? So there's still a lot we still have a lot to learn, and a lot of things where we need to where we need to come to an agreement. So I think patience is also, I know for myself it's difficult, but we also need to think of that medicines, it took many years to come to a place where we had firm standards and HTA assessments, and we knew what to do by when. And this is just a few years old, this field.
Okay, great.
I think patience is good, but patience also running out with if we look at the digital health landscape in the UK, and we see this every day, we have more and more companies that get their evidence generated here, because the NHS is really good for evidence generation as an overall system, because we have this population health approach, despite the disparity of data sets, but it does work. But what do? They then scale in the US or further afield. And, I don't blame them. They need to make money and they need to live. But what we need to do, and where everybody needs to pull on the same strings, is really providing that regulatory framework for health tech into the NHS. And I'm looking at Pharma and other people. That's just has to be top of the list. Otherwise, you're going to lose people, and companies are going to drop, sadly.
I do agree. I agree with that assessment, Conrad. And early value assessment as a program, I've mentioned it already, and even IDAP, it acknowledges that we need to do something now, which is why these programs were developed. They're deviations from what NICE is used to doing, but they're very much there to address a need amongst the innovators in the system. We see some fantastic tech. It would be amazing if patients in the NHS would benefit from it. And that's what we're really trying to move towards. But again, it's that needs-based approach.
Yeah.
Well, and the acceptance that it's trial and error, this one, that we will have to do something that may not work in the beginning. So when I talk about patience, it's more like we will not have a set system from the onset, but we need, but I fully agree that we need to start now, and that requires some risk taking on both the developer side, but also on the NHS side and the NICE side, that we say that we may not have the perfect evidence, we may not have the perfect background to do this, but we'll test it out and see if it works. So fully agree that is also something about coming into the game for Europe, because otherwise it's we see developments quite rapidly in Asia and in the US as well.
Great. Thank you all. And Jesper, I wanted to draw on something you just talked about in terms of risk-taking on the developer side, and ask you a question about Pharma's role in the Access Challenge. Obviously, it's open to everybody, but is Pharma's lack of fundamental readiness to launch digital health products slowing down progress? And what progress do you think must be made?
It's a really good question, because what I do see is that there is a very big appetite in pharma on digital. I think we all, majority of us, we acknowledge that this is something that we need to work on, and this is an area where we really can develop. Also, given that the mission statements of the most pharma companies is about something about improving health and improving lives of patients, so there's a big opportunity here also to from a mission statement. But but the issue is that when you're working, we are as pharma people used to work in a very regulated environment where we tend to know a lot about where are the boundaries, what's the kind of framework that we work within. And then suddenly working in a very agile field, where not only do we need to develop a medication that will then take, let's say, 10 years to develop, then you put it on the market, and then not much happens with it. We see medications that are 50, 60, 70 years old, still be in pharmacies. Whereas when we talk about digital, it's something, do we need to update it every 6 months, every year? We can add improvements on that, and it's a completely new mindset for both us, but also regulators, that we need to think differently. And I think that's a challenging task. And again, you need to put a lot of money into it. And given that we don't know when the return on investment, and will we ever be able to deliver on this one, and will it ever come out to patients? That's it is a tricky one, but I do see a big opportunity for us here. If you take the mission statements of most pharma companies for seriously, saying we want to improve the life of patients in whatever form it's stated there, but there is a big opportunity. So I don't think that we have a choice but to go down that route.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add on that one?
I would add evaluators to that list, Jasper, with the challenge, the dynamic nature of digital, how it can evolve, month on month. We're not talking AI either. Even the more basic digital technologies, they're iterated constantly, and they're iterated usually to improve usability, experience, ultimately uptake could potentially benefit. That could change the clinical outcomes potentially of that product. That affects the cost case, the economics of it. It's really, and it's like a never-ending cycle, which NICE is very much aware of. But it's something that needs to be addressed. Like you said, it's a new way of doing things, and it's not going to go away, to be honest. And they are, it offers new opportunities to everyone if we can get it right. But it takes that investment in time and effort to make it work.
I mean, if you, for example, look at like the big bets. So you look at mixed reality to treat pain, dementia, mental health issues. You look at generative AI in terms of patient engagement, gaining efficiencies, natural language processing, and LLP. So that's like mixed reality can be now. LLP in a clinical setting is probably still 3 to 5 years away. But then you've got quantum computing coming in 10 years that can help us to understand the human body even better in real time in a treatment facing environment. But these are leaps, they're massive leaps. And it's just what we're saying, an innovative medicine has 12 years, I think, in terms of patent protection. It just sits there, right? And this is a proven model in pharma, commercial model. It hasn't changed. 30 years, it has not changed. Despite people probably here saying the opposite, but it's still the same thing. The channels have changed in which doctors are being talked to and payers. But the other stuff changes constantly. So what you have a pharma company that lives in the regulatory space of medicine, where things, when they're out, can take time and it's fine. But then you've got pharma wanting and having to adopt and collaborate with solutions that move so fast that their skill within a pharma company can't keep track. You've got like reasonable exceptions and honorable exceptions like Jasper here and other colleagues in pharma companies that really want to push the envelope. But honestly, it's few and far in between, right? So you need to have a translation engine in between, like genuinely pharma speech, tech startup speech, NHS or health system speech. There's like Mandarin, Indian, and another language from the moon, whatever. They can't talk to one another. So this translation needs to be done to actually keep the pace and keep up. And I see a huge challenge in that. You look at CAR-T, you look at CRISPR and gene therapy, medicine, they're all very innovative, but yet they still live in the regulatory framework of, if they are then being paid for, negotiations are being done, 12 years patent protection. And it stops, right? And all the other stuff that goes alongside, like patient support programs, they move at light speed. So how do we, and I don't have an answer to this, right? Apart from needing a translation engine in the middle, sometimes the NIA can be, but how do we make that happen? And that's one of the key challenges of our time, of that sort of collaboration space.
Great. So thank you, Conrad. Thank you, everyone. I'm aware of time, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about the future of guidelines. But there is one question which I think is really interesting and direct in the from the audience, which is, what percentage of digital health products will become billion-dollar revenue products? Is the value case there? Conrad, would you like to tackle that one?
None. Next question.
Anyone else have anything to add there?
Nothing to
No,
add.
no, I think I actually like Conrad's answer to that one, to say that is the world of billion-dollar products the lost world, or is something of the past now? Also, when we look into medicine, where the big innovations sit, it's actually with the very small patient populations.
Yeah.
And maybe this one we should look more into volume than to the overall revenue, because with this one we have a big opportunity, because we don't have what we normally talk about when talk about cost of goods, and how much does it cost to produce the stuff. Whereas with digital, it's not for free, by no means for free, to make more, to have a host more, but the scale can become very different. So I think we need, and again, coming up to the constant changes, that will we ever see $1 billion? I'm not sure.
I mean, if I could also just jump in as well, just coming back to the point that Conrad made earlier about patent protection with these technologies. So when NICE is looking at digital at the moment through its programs, there are multiple technologies doing the same thing already off the bat. There is no patent protection, it seems. One of the topics we found, we had to stop looking for technologies because there were so many in that space. We couldn't evaluate them all. And I think that's one of the, that's one of the reasons why there may not be billion-dollar products. The industry might be massive. It will have to be distributed amongst the entire industry. Now, how a company makes its product unique or more beneficial, that would always have to be evidenced. And it comes back to how strong is the evidence base to support your value claim. So I think that's something NICE is seeing, is lots of technology being developed in parallel, coming to the market at the same rate, doing very similar things. And how do you differentiate between those value claims between them?
And that's, if I may jump in on that one, that's why we also need to think differently on the value, because if the golden standard are big RCTs, long duration, millions of dollars invested in RCTs, where it's difficult to see how much value will come in the end. Will we ever get paid off the investment that we have? And that's actually where I think that we'll need to see much more real world evidence, because these kind of things, they make a difference in real world, and not so much in an RCT where it's in an artificial environment. So that's why I personally think that we should be much more open, everyone, to put, as long as we make damn sure from the beginning that it doesn't harm patients and it doesn't bring something bad, but that it works, and then put it into testing and see, does it make the difference that we think it makes in real patients with all their comorbidities and lack of adherence and everything that we know happens in real life. So it's another mindset of how to. It's not a one-off, but as you say, Farhan, it's an ongoing process of evaluating, but mainly
NICE
I would say mainly based on real world evidence.
NICE is definitely thinking in a similar way. You need some robust evidence to demonstrate efficacy, safety. Beyond that, close the evidence gaps with real world data. There's an abundance of it being collected. I know there are challenges with that as well, but that's where I think the system should be looking to address, to fill in and close those gaps, and it may improve or address the investment challenges with generating evidence for digital.
Okay. Awesome, thank you all. So final question from me, and we're looking to the future. And I'm going to roll in an audience question with this as well. So we were talking about what guidance can we expect from approval bodies in the coming months or years to support digital health access, acceptance and approval? And there was also a question from the audience early on in the hour around a rough timeline for when reimbursement mechanisms may occur, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, etc. So throwing both those questions out to all of you.
And I'm batting them right to Pharma.
So on the reimbursement timelines, difficult to say at the moment. We can see the work being developed, but we're just not sure what the timelines are, because we don't own that work, so we feed into it. But we know it's happening. In terms of the policies that are being developed, I mean, if they're all fairly recent. So if you work backwards, MHRA's recently put out a draft guidance on regulatory requirements for post-marketing surveillance for medical devices. That's definitely worth being aware of if you're in the digital space, because it's a new approach to regulating medical devices. You're probably used to it from a pharmacovigilance perspective with drugs, so I don't think it'll be that much of a stretch for pharma to get to grips with that. You've got things like the medtech strategy in the from the Department of Health and Social Care, which describes the ambitions for medtech, and then tech-specific guidance that I would probably pay attention to, things like the evidence standards framework, which is from an evaluation perspective, which NICE has published, and similarly the real world evidence framework, which demonstrates how you can use real world evidence to close evidence gaps. So they're all available. Trying to think of anything else off the top of my head.
But we hope that it won't last 15 years before we'll have a reimbursement structure for digital health, whatever digital health is.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, there's already quite a lot of activity. So you might have seen the news about the AI Diagnostics Fund, which went out, I think it's 21 million thereabouts, that's being launched to support the implementation of AI, at least piloting it. And there are other health tech adoption funds that are out there in the system. So there is quite a lot happening at the moment. But in terms of guidance, it feels like it's still coming together.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you
Nothing
all.
to add. Thank you, Farhan.
Thank you, Farhan. So just a couple of minutes left, and I don't think we have time for another question, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up and thank all of our speakers for their time today and for the preparation that went into this session. Thank you for all of you for being here. The panelists have shared with me a couple of resources, so resource links, that if you haven't caught them in the Q&A, I will send those over in a follow-up email. We also will share the recording with you, probably end of next week. You'll receive that, so you can watch that back. You can share it with colleagues. That will be an on-demand link that's accessible anytime. So that's really it from us. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks again to our speakers, and we will see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.